Casey Schmalacker. Welcome. We are going to be talking today about proactive learning over the summer and exploring some themes of what's the right amount, what's too much, what does it look like, and really what are some of the benefits and when you should consider academic supports and academic structure for over the summer. We are very happy to be joined by Sara Downey from At-Home Tutoring Services, and of course our director, Samantha Feinman, from New Frontiers. And so just a couple of logistical stuff to start off. I'm going to just launch two polls just to see the makeup of the audience. So if you could, when you get a chance, just fill that out, that would be great. While you're filling that out, just any questions you have, we would much rather answer your questions than to go through our pre-scripted questions. We'd rather get to what you guys find important. Thank you all for answering that. But in order to ask questions, please do use the questions dialog box. I'll integrate them. I'm launching one other poll, if you guys don't mind, also just completing that one. I will integrate the questions that you submit into our conversation, and so we look forward to it. So let's just see. All right. So 50% of our participants are from the Northeast and 50% from the Southwest. Thank you from across the country. I was actually, me and Sarah were both just in the Southwest in California. So it's beautiful weather there. We have a heat wave up in the Northeast right now. And then just in terms of the other poll, 25% professionals, 25% parent of high school students, and 50% parent of other. I am going to make a little bit of an assumption here that the other is college age because we're discussing academics. If I'm wrong, please just throw into the questions and we'll make it more particular. But just to get started, Sarah, I first want to just jump over to you. What are some reasons to work on academics over the summer? Like, just what are some cases that might come up that you're like, this is a great time to work on this stuff? And let's start there.
You know, I think that we get in our company get phone calls from a variety of different students, some needing academic support, some needing to course complete. And I think sometimes that people get so focused on the academic enrichment, how are my grades, how can I get ahead for the next school year, that people forget about the intellectual curiosity and the joy of learning. And so we encourage not just some of the reasons I just mentioned, but also for people to learn over the summer. You know, take an entrepreneurship class, take a class in baking. I mean, yes, math skills and reading skills are relevant and important, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like we've gotten away from just the intellectual curiosity piece. So I think there's a variety of reasons why people do academic work over the summer, and there's a variety of reasons for work other than academics during the summer.
And so, Sam, so often in academics during the school year, you're forced to take things that you might not enjoy or are difficult. What problems does that present, or rather in a more positive light, what are the benefits for executive function development when it's something that interests you?
Well, I think just thinking about summer and the construct of like how we learn, right? A lot of what we learn during the school year, we're told we have to learn, right? It's part of the curriculum. And many times we're kind of learning it out of the context of how would I use this in real life? Like, how would this serve me or benefit me as I'm growing? And so sometimes, how executive functioning is taught, it's kind of like built into the experience in school and not necessarily the experience when you're learning in school. with a very structured curriculum. But summer is a perfect opportunity to do stuff that you want to do, that you choose to do. And when you're choosing to do it and you're setting your own goals, that is the definition of executive functioning, right? It is the definition of being able to teach. I have a goal. I want to learn something new. I want to learn how to do something better. What are the steps that I need to do in order to take myself from having that goal to actually accomplishing it? So I think it gives us an opportunity to really teach and motivate individuals to work on those executive functioning skills through the lens of doing something that is already internally motivating for them and already connected to having to use those executive functioning skills to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve this summer.
I love it. Research does show working on executive functions, it's got to be goals you want. And it's easier to work on strategies when it's something you actually want to achieve. Executive functions are goal-directed behaviors. And so you sometimes see struggles in developing those skills when it's not really lined up with the goal you really want. And I always think of those students that say in the math class, when am I ever going to use this in life? Where you see the difficulties with executive function,
right,
because it's not really associated with a goal that they see.
Right, exactly.
Well, I also think that in a low stakes environment, test out certain processes and certain approaches for how you're doing that. And especially to Sam's point, like if it's something that you want to do, it becomes much easier, and then you can build on that success. Listen, we're all humans, right? We all want to avoid things that are uncomfortable. If we have to set certain goals around pre-calculus and, some of those things related to subjects that we're not crazy about, but we're crazy about starting a business or developing a sports camp, then you're motivated to do it. So, yeah.
And you kind of read my mind there, Sarah, a little bit leading into the next question of what is different about learning over the summer? And you started talking about its lower stakes and there's decreased pressure. And so with something like that student that's like math, when am I ever going to use that? What do you see that's different with these students when they're learning these things over the summer without the anxieties of school associated? What learning benefits do you see?
Well, it's just a much more casual environment, assuming it's not related to course completion or something like that. I just think it depends on the student's intrinsic motivation too. If they're previewing a course that they want to do well in for the upcoming school year, that's a different student than somebody that's being not forced, but having to review course content that they didn't achieve mastery over from the school year. So I just think it's extremely circumstantial how students approach schoolwork over the summer. It depends. It depends.
Yeah, no, and so Sam, how could either professionals or parents help people see that maybe maybe the goal isn't to be a mathematician, but why would previewing a course, how does that line up with goals? Like, should we be lying to them and say, like, no, you're going to use calculus throughout life? Or is there another way to kind of frame the goal of how this is actually going to benefit?
Well, I think it all depends on the learner, right? But previewing, sometimes why does previewing work, right? Well, repetition helps. So with hard concepts that you need to practice several times in order to achieve, previewing, reviewing, all of those types of strategies are very advantageous because it gives you multiple touch points with the curriculum. And so I think that when we have learners that struggle with concepts, that struggle with test taking, that struggle with studying, I think that, what we help to kind of help them understand is that this is going to make getting to the end goal of getting through the curriculum less arduous because, you know, and you use real life examples, you know, you may do something once and you're not great at it. You may do it a second time and you're a little better at it. And then you do it a third time and you do it a fourth time. With the students and the clients I've worked with, I always use the example of when I became a teacher the first time, I found lesson planning very difficult. It would take me hours to write my lesson plans my first year as a teacher. My second year as a teacher, I started to get better at it. By the fourth, fifth, sixth year I was teaching, it took me 5 minutes to write a lesson plan. And so, you know, you use examples like that of, you know, it might not be something you want to do, but the end goal of understanding the curriculum will be easier if you have access to the curriculum in a different way than what the standard access is to it, which is now it's September, new school year, new curriculum. And so it might take that pressure off of being anxious about taking tests or being anxious about cramming or studying, because the first time that they see the material isn't going to be in the beginning of the school year. And so, you know, sometimes it takes just a little encouragement and then connecting the end result to the efforts you put in previously, right? And might be tough in the beginning, but then when they start to see, oh yeah, this I looked at this stuff over the summer and now it's not, you know, it's not as foreign to me as it would have been if I didn't look at it, you know, and that could drive, you know, those behaviors to continue moving forward.
That's the discussion that I have with parents too. I say, listen, imagine your student walking into a classroom feeling confident for one of the first times. Let's pick on math. And if you have a student who feels confident in the curriculum, it's just going to make the goal achieving that much easier. I mean, it's a momentum thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's no grade pressures. When you first look at it the first time, let's just explore this material with no pressures of having to study for an exam, having to finish the homework for a grade, right? There's no measurement connected to it. It's just, let's take a look at it and see how we feel about it, right? Let's take a look.
Fun. It can be fun.
Right. And no pressure.
Right.
I also I think it's so important connecting the emotions that you feel when you don't feel good about a course.
Right.
That's the goal. The goal might not be to get an A+ and master all the material over the summer. The goal might be to decrease your anxiety when you start off the class so that you can get a firm footing. And now the goal isn't necessarily associated with being, I'll use the math example again. I feel like I love math, so I hate that it's picked on, but that idea of, isn't it a nice goal to not hate math class? Like, we're not saying you have to love it, but let's mitigate the negative feeling of it. That can be a goal that's separate from being good at math. And that might resonate. The one other thing I just wanted to quickly throw out as another research point. Research shows that people that go and access help and help-seeking behaviors in the classroom need it less. It's paradoxical. The people that need the help don't go and ask for it, and the people that don't need it are the ones accessing it. And so if we can set up students to be more comfortable with work in the beginning, they can get into those patterns of behavior of accessing help in the beginning, and then when it gets more difficult, they've already learned to access the help. They're not embarrassed to go to the teacher because they felt good in the beginning, so they went to the teacher when they felt good. So then when it gets more difficult, they've already had the practice under the belt. And rather than the other way around, where they don't feel comfortable, they don't access help, and then it just gets harder and they continue to not access help.
The other thing that I think that any kind of assistance, whether it's the summer or during the school year, I think it helps divert the narrative that students get entrenched in about their skill set. Like, well, I'm not really good in math, or English isn't my thing. And I think that to Sam's point, like repetition yields mastery. And also our goal is always to divert the narrative to a positive and not, not say, well, I'm not a master, I'm not good at math. I mean, particularly, with younger female students, in early elementary, they get in this kind of track of I'm not a STEM person, I'm not a math person. It drives me crazy when we work with students like that, particularly elementary age, who already say I'm not good, or I'm good at something, or I'm bad at something. So.
And so we got a couple of questions from the audience that I wanted to jump to. And Sarah or Sam, whoever wants to jump in with this one first. So, parent of a college-age student and a high school student. And I was going to ask a follow-up, and I might, to the participant about what age in college, but we can answer it more generally. They want to take a break over the summer. They don't like this prescriptive schedules. They don't like the structure. They just want a break. I want my summer. We hear that so often. I want my summer. I work so hard. I want my summer. But they would benefit from some additional supports because it is so difficult. And also just coming out of COVID, there's been a lot of regression. And so is that a battle worth picking with them to try and help them see, like, how do you navigate that? Like, you don't want to force someone to do something that they don't want to do, but what does that look like to kind of negotiate a little bit? And maybe bringing up some of the stuff that you guys already talked about. Is it something that interests them? Is it something that's engaging them? And I'm known for my multi-part questions. One other thing I'll just throw in, if you guys wanted to discuss, is the expectations from it. Like, how do you present this? Is that important as well? So if someone comes in, they're resistant to support, how would you talk to them to see if we could get some buy-in?
So, I mean, I'm more than happy to jump in and just say, I'm the parent of a teenager, and she typically wants to do everything opposite of what I suggest. And it has a lot to do with her drive developmentally to want to have agency, to want to make her own decisions, to make her own choices, to drive her own expectations. And that's great. But at the same time, if I was allowed her to just make all of her decisions without parameters, it probably wouldn't serve her well. So, I like to say, try and set expectations, but provide autonomy and choice making to your teenagers and young adults, because they really do crave autonomy, and they really do want to be in the driver's seat of their own decision making, but they still need guidance from you and parameters from you as their parent. And so, I think one of the things that I try to encourage is, you can choose whatever you want to do. It could be something new, a new skill you learn this summer, or it could be something that you currently do that you want to get better at. But you need to have some form of a goal for this summer for yourself. Make money and get a job, play baseball better, work on your art or your photography, whatever it is. And then let's create a goal, or let's create some goals, smaller goals of how we're going to achieve that. And so I think that, you have to help the individuals become an active participant in progress, but laying clear boundaries that summer is not a time to just lay around and do nothing because you're going to get bored. Instead, let's come up with 3 to 5 goals that you may want to choose from to achieve for the summer. one of my daughter's goals was she wanted to go away. And so she went to sleepaway. She's in sleepaway camp for 2 weeks. And there's so many other things that she's going to learn. It's her first time doing that. There's so many things she's going to learn just from that experience. But she had to be the one invested in the decision of, here's how I want to help myself this summer. And sometimes those decisions are hard to make in the dynamic of a parent and a child, because again, children are naturally developing towards not relying on their parents anymore. So they're constantly trying to pull themselves away from what their parents want, even if it's in their best interest. So, engaging in these conversations, if you're not making progress, having a mentor or a coach or somebody else that the child looks up to, engaging in this conversation with them can be very advantageous. So, it's not easy. It's easier said than done. But first and foremost, they have to be invested in something, and that something needs to be something that they choose. And it can't be video games.
Don't tell my son that. But one thing I learned from you all is that there's like two simple ideas. One is that there are things that have to get done and things that you want to do. And so it's also a priority point too. Like, as I think developmentally, as these students get older, there's an acceptance of, okay, there are things that I have to get done. And I think where there's a disconnect is as they get older, if they're not willing to accept that concept, that the goal setting, the achievement of the goals gets difficult. And what I tell parents too is, getting to the accountability piece, is that everyone has a decision. Like, where do you want to be on the spectrum? Like, let's just take the COVID regression. You have an opportunity over the summer to get your student, to keep your student below grade level, which most of them are, particularly in math, at grade level with enrichment, or above grade level when they approach the upcoming school year. And so those are things that maybe are in the category of you should do rather than nice to do. But I think that students, once they accept that concept, that it gets a little bit easier as they get older.
And just another thing to throw in. So no parent, I try not to speak in extremes, but if a parent says to a kid, you should work on academics over the summer, all that kid hears is, it's never enough. They always want more from me. Why can't I just relax? Why can't they see I work so hard? Why? Accept me for who I am. We could say the same exact thing and they could receive it very differently. Because even if you took a script of what we would say to someone, you're the parent. There's emotions involved. And just like Sam said, they want independence. So by you presenting the goal, it's your goal. It's not theirs. Whereas someone that's at least a few degrees of separation away from it, they don't have as much of a stake. Like if we spoke to a student and they chose not to work on academics over the summer, come back to me in 5 years, that is going to have no impact on my life. Now, that might not have an impact on a parent's life, but the kids perceive it as the outcomes of my decisions influence you. And so now like the whole idea that Sarah talked about in the beginning of this removes the anxiety, removes the stress from working on this stuff. If this is an expectation coming from a parent, it doesn't do that. There still is anxiety. There still is this association with, it's an expectation, not my own goal. It's an expectation that I work on academics, not because I want to enrich myself. And so that's just an important separation where the messenger really does matter.
Well, and to Sam's point, I think that if you have someone that is like the accountability coach, that really can have a huge impact. Because people, I mean, some people are pleasers, a lot of people are pleasers. They want to waive, waive their goal achievement, and say, listen, I did this and we worked on this and I achieved it, but with your help, it occurred. So I think that if you have the right mentor, the right accountability coach, it can really, really make all the difference for sure.
And so Sam, with the same parent, kids are getting older, they're a period in college, and still has that mentality of like secondary school. Summertime is my time off. And maybe if you could just talk a little bit on goal setting and how and previewing like the future. And again, some of this advice is going to be difficult for parents to implement. I do want to just give that side note there. Some of the things we share, a parent again can do everything right, say all the right words, but it can confuse it. So what are other things maybe to help motivate an individual, because it doesn't have to be no structure summer or doing academics all summer. What are some other things that can maybe motivate an individual to work on similar skills, executive functioning skills, but maybe it's not opening up a math textbook and going through a math textbook?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we have to stop and say, who is the right person to help get the individual invested in goal setting, right? And so that could be a parent or not. That could be a coach. It could be a mentor. It could be a family member. It could be an older, sibling. But I think that if there is resistance to the process of structuring summer in any capacity, then I think we have to take ourselves out of the picture and say, okay, I'm not making any progress here with him or her. Who can help make progress in this area? And I can't answer that question because for every person, it's going to be different. But there has to be somebody that can help that individual to identify what it is they want to achieve in the summer and how they're going to get there, and help them get invested in that decision-making process. I think that, with college students, we have to identify maybe they do need a break in some capacity. And how do we evaluate that? Well, how did they do during the school year? Did they put a lot of effort in? Was it a very arduous semester? What exactly it has led up to the feeling of, I need to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks off and do nothing? What is leading to that? And if, sometimes it's just cognitively exhausting to get through a college semester, especially if they've taken a lot of classes that required a lot of studying and a lot of effort throughout the semester. And in the beginning, they're just feeling drained and just need some time off. But the summer is a long time, and so they may be feeling that way the first week that they're home from school, but things might be different in the second week. So maybe meeting somewhere in the middle, right? Okay, take the first week. We won't talk about this. Take the first week and do whatever you want. Let's create a time, a day and a time that we can commit to next week where we can revisit this conversation. Just meet them where they're at, because again, you can't force somebody to be invested in themselves. They have to activate into being invested in change. And so just finding where that space is the first most important step. And so they just might not be ready this moment, but what is our clear future? When are we going to revisit this? And what is that going to look like? Might be your next step there.
Timing is so important.
Mhm.
It's like the last thing after taking your last final to start thinking about summer, not a good time. You're not going to be receptive and they'll react to it. And so being strategic with the timing of giving that space, and I think Sam it is really important about clear future. I'd like, can we discuss this again in a couple of weeks?
But not
Because
can we need to discuss this. When makes the most sense for you? When will you be ready? And it doesn't have to be me. When can this be discussed? Who would you like to discuss it with, right? So just, again, meet them where they are, because they need to be invested in taking that next step. And hopefully they will be able to provide you with some insight into how to help them get there.
yeah, it's how important do you see it, Sarah? I know we don't work with people that don't want to work with us. I'd love to hear if you guys also do that, and why that's important. Like what the difference is from someone that's more being not encouraged, but forced and told to be quiet about their discontent. Like, what do you see as that difference? Like, I know, like we say it's a waste of money. Like, are you guys in a similar camp with trying to force something down their throats that they don't want to swallow?
Well, I don't know. I think that sometimes there's a cold, brutal reality of you have to just kind of pass this class. And so, we try to provide support to make those kinds of things happen. And to add services like executive functioning or goal setting, these other things, it really kind of tops off that approach. But sometimes sometimes you have to get tutored every single day in order to just make it. So I don't know. I think the more these students accept the idea that sometimes you just have to get things done, to the point of the conversation we were discussing earlier, the easier our job is, But that's not to say that we have to have a connection between educator and student, regardless of whether or not they want that educator there, because if they're resistant to having enrichment or academic support and they detest the educator, then it's game over. Like there's not going to be a positive outcome at all.
You need someone to suffer with.
Yeah, it's frustrating because I think that parents understand, listen, if you just commit to this, if you just work a little bit harder and you try a little bit more, you're going to be successful. And sometimes the students are resistant to that idea. So it's an interesting dynamic. The dynamic between parent and student, if that dynamic was not in place for us, we would be out of business, because I would say a huge percentage of our parent student relationship, they can't work together on goal setting for academic achievement. They have to kind of step away. The parent has to step away from the situation. I don't know if that's your experience, but it is for us.
It makes it emotional. Education shouldn't be emotional. It
Right.
should be objective. And you often see that when you talk to someone, like really, like it's clear as day for everyone else that working on this stuff over the summer will benefit you. When students don't see that as clearly, it's often because there's emotions involved in it. And that is almost that first step of trying to remove as much of the emotional reaction of don't touch my summer to, look, if we're talking 2 hours a week, in the reality of everything, all the other free time, is that a big ask? And I think that's another thing that is important, of the volume of expectation. But before we just shift over to that, because I'd love to explore that a little bit of what's too much and what's too little. But with, how do I want to phrase this? So I just recently spoke to a student where he doesn't really want to do a lot of the summer, wants to play video games, but he's going into his senior year of college. He wanted to get an internship, but it didn't work out. COVID. A lot of people were in that camp. So any parents here, if their kids didn't get an internship, don't be upset at them. But the goal, like the way I almost reversed engineered working with him was this idea of the goal was to build up your resume, right? Is there other ways we can build up the resume? Can we take a certificate course? Can we do this? It's at your own pace. You don't have to fully commit. It's not a high fee. I saw this kid brighten up. Yeah, wow, that's lined up. And really what that was a presentation of starting with the goal and then working backwards to what are the steps to achieving it, as opposed to throwing that in. And so, Sam, just how, I feel like I've asked this a bunch of times, but like, how important is it for people supporting these individuals to broaden our expectations of what a good productive summer is? Like, I think that's one thing that sometimes gets caught up with these kids is they think if we mention working over the summer, and then just the one other piece to add on to this, when should parents, and I know this is going to be everyone's a little different, but when should parents start saying like you have to act like an adult? Like you have to work somehow over the summer, whether it's academics, getting a job or something, because otherwise I ain't going to pay for you to just sit around and do nothing. Like, is that too soon? Like we're just out of COVID. Like when does that reality check need to start kicking in that, no, you can't just sit around and do nothing all summer. You can't, or
Yeah,
I'm not giving you money.
I think what you did with that student is really brilliant because sometimes students come to the table with very narrow visions of what they should be doing, right? And so what you help to do with that student is open his eyes to the fact that you can build a resume, and it doesn't have to be through an internship. There are lots of other opportunities that you can participate in, and some you'll be invested in, and some you won't want to do, and some you will achieve, and some you won't. But exposing them to that level of choice, variety, right, and diversity in how you can achieve the goal can be very enlightening to students that have a very narrow experience, relatively speaking, in life, right? They still need a lot of guidance, and and so I think that the most important thing to do is to make that goal setting process, when you say, at what point do you put, your foot down and say you have to act like an adult? That goal setting experience for the summer is a non-negotiable. Again, it's an expectation. It's not it's not can you, or we think you should, or it's the expectation of what's going to happen in the summer, but you're going to be the driver of it. And so I'm not going to tell you, the expectation is that you're going to have some form of a goal for the summer. I'm not going to necessarily tell you what that goal is, and I can help you be part of the goal setting process, or I can provide you with guidance in helping to set somebody up that can help you in the goal setting process. But the goal setting itself is non-negotiable. That's the part of becoming an adult. That's the part of becoming an independent. And so, I do an exercise with a lot of the clients that I work with and I draw a staircase. I visualize a staircase, and at the top of the staircase, we write down what do you want out of life? And usually it's pretty similar over and over and over again. I want to be happy, and I want to be independent, and I want to be able to support myself. And you hear that over and over and over again with adolescents and young adults. They want to be happy, and they want to be able to support themselves. They want to be independent. And each stair in that staircase represents a myriad of different skills that you have to develop. You can't just get to the top of the staircase without working on all of these different things. And the way you work on all of these different things is one step at a time. And each step is a goal, and it's the goal setting process. And so they really have to understand, what is that purpose in the goal setting process for the summer? Why do I have to get a job? Why do I get an internship? Why do I, take a certification class? In our organization, Casey knows this, we've been talking a lot about the why lately. Like, why do we do things? And sometimes the students don't make the connection between the why. Why is this so important? And having those conversations about big picture and the why can be very eye-opening, just like you had, Casey, with that client, right? It opened his eyes to see that it wasn't just, there were many different paths that could get him to the end result of building his resume. And just because one path didn't work doesn't mean we don't turn around and try another one.
And so, just to shift a little bit, Sarah, for those cases that we're trying to encourage intellectual curiosity, not the ones where we have to put out a fire, not that we need to make up work over the summer, maybe more of the previewing, the ones where there's really not like a lot of pressure. What's that right balance? Like, if someone came in and wanted to work on stuff, like how much would you recommend over the summer? Like, I know I've had some parents come in and they set very high expectations. I want them meeting with you 5 hours a week. I want them to get through half the course and blah, blah. Like, sometimes it's too much. And like, I get anxiety when I hear it. But like, if someone came in, if someone just called you guys separately right after this and said, we want to encourage this, how much of it, A, comes from the student themselves, but how would you kind of talk to those parents of like what that right Goldilocks zone is, or what to balance that it is summer. They should have downtime. They should have free time and enjoy themselves, but we can also integrate this. And like, what would that recommendation be?
Well, we tend to be pretty conservative. I think that it's easier if a student is coming in because they want, and I'm going to pick on math again, about math enrichment. If that's a passion of theirs and they want to, like, they genuinely want to learn, to review the past content, and then to preview their upcoming content for the school, that's an easy one, right? And I think that, I think it just depends. But I also believe that if you really look at all the hours of the day, like, I try to talk to the parents, like, listen, for your student to carve out 30 to 60 minutes a day of any kind of skills mastery is really not that hard. And if you need to bring somebody in and take you out of the equation, somebody that can motivate them just to do some practice in between intersession, like that's what you should do. Like, we're pretty conservative about all that. I don't think you have to be crazy, but this idea that we can all be hedonists and do what we want all day, every day, it's just not realistic. There're just some things you have to get done. So, and the people that call us, the parents that call us, are motivated to make it happen for their kiddo. They just need help. They need us to bridge it and make sure that it happens, because they can't. But usually it's the parent that has difficulty working one-on-one with the student. So they need to bring in somebody. So.
And that's a real life skill, right? I mean, that's a real life skill to teach. And again, it's about perspective and showing this, showing the children, like, do you know anybody that just sits around all day and does nothing? Like, everybody has, in some capacity, everybody serves a purpose in some capacity, whether they have a job or whether they help other people or whatever it is. You have to have a sense of purpose. That's what life is all about. And again, that staircase, if you want to be independent and you want to be happy, then you have to get yourself to a point where you contribute and have a sense of purpose. That's one of those many steps that you need to take in order to achieve that long-term goal.
And we'll be in a couple of weeks, Sarah won't be joining us for this one, but we'll be doing another webinar about like mental fitness. And so goals don't always have to be super structured, like having to do with academics. There can be other goals as well. And so sometimes as a parent, it's not just giving up at the first denial from a student, but seeing what else can stick for goal setting. And getting creative on the delivery and the perspective. I mean, I just recently spoke to a student again. Parents wanted him to work on academics over the summer. He could use some help with perfectionism in his writing. I simply brought up, hey, you love history. Would you be willing to write a history paper? And he's like, yeah, that's really interesting. I'd love it. Could I also do a video presentation to you guys at the end of the summer? And I was like, yeah, cool, great. And that was something he wanted to do, but we're working on something that he doesn't like to work on. And so again, sometimes it's our own ability to be flexible. Like we have to model flexibility for those we work with, that cognitive flexibility. And sometimes we're not that flexible in our thinking. And this is almost bashing a little bit the question that I'm going to move on to next, but like, oh, it's summertime, have to do test prep. ACT, SAT test prep. It's the summer. It's the time we have to do it. Have to? Does it have to be now? Like, and so that language sometimes of our rigidity can back us into a corner where they don't listen because we're being rigid. And then especially parents, when kids see you're being rigid, they're going to be just as stubborn as you. They're going to back into the corner. And just like Sam started off with, they're not going to listen to anything you have to say. They get a whiff of those academics and they're like, nope, that's what parents want. And so, Sarah, like, what are some things that, so we've talked about like the intellectual curiosity, things that interest them. We talked about some remedial areas of being more prepared. I just mentioned test prep. What are some other common areas that you see that people do want to work on things over the summer? And maybe some outside of the box areas that parents might not be thinking of?
Well, we've had a huge influx of clients because of the COVID regression. I mean, the skills regression has been shocking. I mean, the statistics you read are so alarming. So for the most part, over the last, since January of 2020, we've been discussing skills regression and closing those gaps. So that's one. Test preparation is interesting because some students, you talk about the ultimate goal setting at that age is what college do you want to get into? And part of getting into these college, everyone needs to attain a certain GPA and just concrete test prep results. So that tends to be a little bit easier to have students accept over the summer months. There's also a peer component to it as well because everyone starts talking about it. And so they get motivated within their peer group to be able to do those kinds of things. So there's skills regression, there's test preparation, and then we see a lot of people just kind of participating in workshops. If you have a passion for something, kind of leaning into it and doing that. There's so many things that are available, even on the internet or in communities where students can go and attend certain things. So I'd say it's a variety. We have tons of students that kind of fit in some of the things I just mentioned around camps. They go to camp. It's a way for them to convene with their friends and to attain this independence that Sam talked about earlier. I don't think there's not one thing that students in general are doing over the summer. It's varied for sure. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's great just to have us be expanding our thoughts. Sam, is there any other areas that from anyone you've worked with that are like great opportunities to work on some of this stuff over the summer? No, it's okay. Just.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just think, I think the conversations need to start sooner rather than later. And the planning process can be, an executive functioning activity in and of itself. And so you know, it's just, I think the most important piece is getting the investment of the person that this plan is for is critical. It's, you know, I think once you hit adolescence and the teenage years, children need to feel a sense of agency. They need to feel a sense of control in the decision-making process. We need to get their buy-in. And so that may take, you know, some time. So the sooner to plan and have these conversations, the better.
Okay. And I'll just throw out a couple of resources for people. You can look up multiple MOOCs, massive online, I even forget, but they're free courses, college level. Doesn't always mean super difficult. So there's definitely high school students that can do MOOC courses. Highly, oh, thanks, Dan Greenwood coming in for the layup. Massive online open courses. But it's lynda.com through LinkedIn Learning. I think it's something like $30 a month for unlimited access unless they changed it. I will say lynda.com. There's also another free version. I'm forgetting the name. It's another woman's name. But lynda.com is great for like graphic design courses, for coding. There's so many kids that you talk about any academics, they hate it, and then you mention coding and they're all in for it. These are great opportunities. So of course, Coursera, edx.org. There's so many resources out there. I do like Lynda for resume building because it is a certificate. It's a known resource. It's not a free resource. So it just, you pay for something, it's associated with higher quality. And the one other thing I wanted to just make a little note of is Khan Academy. It's very structured, but part of the reason why there's two aspects to Khan Academy that could be a good low stakes way for any students that might be resistant to actually receiving support, because it could help make problems not have bias. So first, in the academic content, the academic lens, oh, you're struggling with the content, not scoring well. Maybe you don't learn best from videos. Maybe you can gain, like you need someone to talk to help you through these problems. Would you consider a tutor supporting you through this? That could be a way where you're not saying they can't do it, but you're sharing that they have a resource and it helps them with problem solving skills. On the other end, and I don't mean to plug too much, executive function coaching along with tutoring, but if they're just not moving forward, they're not managing their time, Khan Academy is a great way to show that. It's been 2 weeks, you haven't gotten anything done. Do you think like maybe a little support just to move forward with this? And so all of these, not just Khan Academy is just easier to measure progress. It is very user friendly. But these are all ways to, if you get some buy-in, but they don't want to accept help for it, then you can help them see that they might need help. And it's not you assuming beforehand that they need it, because that's going to lead to an emotional reaction. You just think I can't do anything. You're just throwing people at me. And again, that sets it down the wrong path. So on that note, I want to say thank you to Sarah and thank you to Sam.
Thank you to Casey. You always facilitate these perfectly.
I've had like a giddy smile because I love talking about this stuff. Like and I'm sure Sarah has the same experience and Sam has the same experience. When you do have that aha moment from someone that they're like, oh yeah, I could do that. That's not a big deal. Like it really does. It makes us feel really good because I think it does all loop back to what Sarah said in the beginning. It's learning for the sake of learning. Curiosity, enjoyment. And for people in the education space, removal of that test focus, that assessment focus can really encourage people to feel better about themselves, just to learn. And so we do have a survey afterwards. Any specific follow-ups, if you have specific questions for Sarah, for Sam, for myself, please throw them in there and we'll follow up with you guys. Or you could always give us a call. So Sarah is from At-Home Tutoring Services, and we're from New Frontiers. So thank you again so much, guys, and I look forward to the next one.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Sarah.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.